Ambassador Kethel walked slowly toward the large doors of the Terran Council building. His blue scales shimmered under the bright lights as he tried to control his fear. Behind him, two other members of the Zephyrian Alliance followed with heavy steps. They carried data tablets filled with terrible images and numbers that told the story of their dying worlds. The council chamber was bigger than Kethel had expected. Humans sat in curved rows around a central speaking area. Their faces looked serious and focused. General Paul Martinez sat in the front row wearing his military uniform with many medals. Next to him was Dr. Lisa Xiang, a woman with kind eyes, who had visited Zephyria many times for botanical research. Commander Jake Sullivan sat nearby, younger than the others but already famous throughout the galaxy for his victories in space battles. Kethel stepped forward and activated his holographic display. The air filled with images of destruction that made several humans gasp. Entire planets appeared as burned rocks floating in space. Cities that once held millions of people were now empty craters. Space stations twisted into metal wreckage drifted through the darkness. "Honored humans," Kethel began, his voice shaking despite his efforts to stay calm. "We come to you because we have nowhere else to turn. The Krillian swarm has consumed 3 of our star systems. They eat everything they touch. Plants, animals, buildings, even the soil itself disappears into their bodies. What you see here happened in less than 2 months." He changed the display to show fleet battle recordings. Massive ships from 6 different species fought against dark creatures that seemed to flow like liquid through space. The alien ships fired their weapons with desperate fury, but the swarm creatures absorbed the damage and kept coming. One by one, the defending ships exploded or were swallowed whole by the advancing nightmare. The Galactic Defense Coalition brought together every military force in our region of space. We had 3,000 ships and crews from the Altarians, the Centauri, the Vegan Republic, and others. The battle lasted 4 days. Only 200 ships escaped. Kethel's voice grew quieter. My own brother commanded the flagship of our fleet. I watched his ship disappear into the mouth of something that should not exist. Dr. Chang leaned forward in her seat. How many worlds have been lost completely? 17 planets that supported life. Billions of people are gone. The swarm does not take prisoners or leave survivors. They consume everything and use it to make more of themselves. Kethel touched a control and the display showed a time-lapse view of a planet being devoured. Green forests and blue oceans turned gray and lifeless as the swarm spread across the surface like a disease. General Martinez stood up slowly. "Ambassador, what exactly are you asking from humanity?" Kethel turned to face the general directly. "We do not expect you to fight our battles for us. We know that Earth is far from the war zone and your people are safe. But we have heard stories of human tactical knowledge and innovative thinking. We need advisors who can help us coordinate what remains of our forces. Perhaps some of your scientists could study the swarm and find weaknesses we have missed. We ask for wisdom and guidance, not soldiers." Commander Sullivan spoke up from his seat. "What makes you think we can help where 6 species working together could not?" "Because humans think differently than we do. Your species has survived wars on your homeworld that lasted for generations. You have experience with enemies that seem impossible to defeat. The Altarians are excellent engineers, but they think in straight lines. The Centauri have powerful weapons, but they always use the same tactics. Humans adapt and improvise in ways that confuse even your allies." The council chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of the air systems. Kethel could see the humans looking at each other with expressions he could not read. These creatures had only been part of galactic society for 50 years, but in that time they had earned respect from species that had existed among the stars for thousands of years. Dr. Chang spoke first. "The Zephyrian Alliance has been our trading partner since first contact. Your botanical research helped us terraform 15 colony worlds. Your people shared their knowledge freely and asked for little in return. We owe you more than advice." General Martinez nodded slowly. "The situation you described threatens more than just your worlds. If the swarm continues to grow and spread, eventually they will reach human space. This is not just about helping allies. It is about stopping a threat to all life in the galaxy. Commander Sullivan stood up and walked to the holographic display. He studied the battle recordings with the focused attention of a professional soldier. Ambassador, you came here asking for advisors and tactical support. That shows wisdom and humility. But humanity has learned over many centuries that half measures against an existential threat usually lead to complete failure. Kethel felt a strange mixture of hope and confusion. What do you mean, Commander? Sullivan turned to face him with a smile that was both reassuring and frightening. When humans commit to helping our friends, we do not send a few advisors or share some research data, we commit completely. You ask for help against an enemy that threatens all life in the galaxy. What you are about to receive is something that will change the course of this war. The other humans in the chamber began to nod in agreement. Kethel realized that something important had just happened, though he did not yet understand what it meant for his people or for the galaxy. The message went out to every human colony, station, and outpost in the galaxy exactly 6 hours after the council meeting ended. Emergency Protocol 7 had never been used before. Most humans had never even heard of it. The protocol was created for a single purpose: to respond to threats that could destroy not just humanity, but all intelligent life in the galaxy. Captain Amy Foster stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiance, watching ships appear in space around her. Each vessel emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their crews already at battle stations. The sight made her heart race with pride and fear. She had commanded warships for 12 years, but she had never seen anything like this. Captain, we have incoming ships from the Tau Ceti system, reported Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake from his tactical station. 12 heavy cruisers and 30 destroyers, all reporting ready for immediate deployment. Amy nodded and checked her displays. The numbers kept growing. Ships from Earth, Mars, Europa, and dozens of colony worlds continued to arrive. Each one carried crews who had dropped everything to answer the call. Teachers, farmers, engineers, and shopkeepers had put on military uniforms and taken their places at weapons stations and engineering consoles. How many ships do we have now? Amy asked. 347 capital ships, 800 cruisers, and over 2,000 destroyers and frigates, Ryan replied. Total crew complement is approaching 4 million people. Amy stared at the numbers on her screen. The largest human fleet in history was assembling around her ship. These were not just professional soldiers and spacers. These were ordinary people who had volunteered to travel across the galaxy to fight monsters they had never seen, to protect aliens they had never met. Admiral Kate Morrison's voice came over the communication system from the fleet flagship UHS Retribution. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Today we leave human space not as conquerors seeking glory or resources. We go as defenders of innocent life. The Krillian swarm believes that strength comes from consuming others. They will learn that true strength comes from protecting others. In the cargo holds of massive transport ships, Colonel Danny Roberts walked between rows of Marines checking their equipment. The soldiers came from every human world and every background imaginable. Some were veterans of the colonial wars, others had never fired a weapon in anger. All of them knew they were about to face something that had destroyed entire civilizations. Listen up, Roberts called out to his troops. The intel reports tell us the swarm is unlike anything we have fought before. They think as one mind and adapt to our tactics in real time, but they have never faced human soldiers. They do not understand concepts like courage, sacrifice, or fighting for something bigger than yourself. That ignorance will be their downfall. Sergeant Major Carol Hughes raised her hand. Sir, what happens if we cannot beat them with conventional tactics? Roberts smiled grimly. Then we will beat them with unconventional tactics. Humans have been fighting impossible odds since we lived in caves. We always find a way to win even if we have to invent new ways to do it. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the UHS Retribution. As the fleet's chief science officer, she had access to every piece of data about the swarm that the Alliance had gathered. The creatures were unlike anything in the databases. They were not truly alive in the way that humans understood life, but they were not machines either. They existed somewhere between biology and technology, using both to devastating effect. "Computer, show me the molecular analysis of swarm tissue samples," she commanded. The holographic display showed a complex structure that seemed to shift and change as she watched. These things rewrite their own genetic code in real time. No wonder they can adapt so quickly to new weapons and tactics. Her assistant, Dr. Ben? Taylor looked up from his own workstation. "Elena, I've been studying their attack patterns. They do not just consume matter for food. They seem to be processing information from everything they destroy. Every ship they eat teaches them new engineering principles. Every world they devour gives them new biological templates." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you saying they get smarter with every victory?" "Exactly. The coalition fleets that fought them were not just defeated. They were turned into lessons that made the swarm more dangerous for the next battle. The implications were terrifying. Humanity was not just facing a powerful enemy, they were facing one that learned from every mistake its opponents made. Traditional military doctrine would not work against creatures that could analyze and counter any tactic within hours of encountering it. Admiral Morrison called a meeting of all senior officers via holographic projection. Captains and colonels from across the fleet appeared as shimmering images in the conference room of the UHS Retribution. "People, we face an enemy that has destroyed everything sent against it," Morrison began. "They learn from every engagement and adapt faster than any opponent we have previously encountered. However, they have never faced human military doctrine. We have advantages they cannot anticipate." Captain Foster spoke from her position aboard the UHS Defiance. "What kind of advantages, Admiral?" "The swarm thinks in terms of efficiency and optimization. They expect their enemies to use the most logical tactics and weapons. Humans are famous throughout the galaxy for doing the unexpected. We will use that reputation to our advantage." Colonel Roberts appeared in the projection from his transport ship. "My Marines are ready for anything, Admiral. We have trained for urban warfare, guerrilla tactics, and operations in hostile environments. If these creatures want to fight humans on the ground, they will learn why that is a mistake." Dr. Vasquez joined the conversation from her laboratory. "I am working on understanding their biology. If we can find a weakness in their adaptation process, we might be able to exploit it. But we need battle data from actual engagements to complete my analysis." The meeting continued for 2 hours as the officers planned their approach to the war zone. Every detail was discussed and contingencies were prepared. The human fleet would arrive at the Zephyrian homeworld in 36 hours. When they got there, they would face the greatest test in human history. As the meeting ended, Admiral Morrison made one final announcement. "Remember, we are not just representing humanity in this fight. We are representing the idea that intelligent beings have the right to exist free from fear. The swarm threatens that right. We will not allow them to succeed." The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system like a storm emerging from calm skies. Captain Amy Foster gripped the arms of her command chair as the UOS's Defiance shuddered from the transition. Around her ship, thousands of other vessels materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the light of the distant star. "Sweet Mother of God," whispered Commander Tony Kim from the bridge of the UOS Vanguard. His tactical officer had just activated the long-range sensors, and the readings were unlike anything in their training manuals. The Zephyrian homeworld hung in space like a dying blue jewel. What had once been a paradise of green continents and silver cities was now covered in a gray substance that pulsed with sick light. Orbiting the planet were creatures that defied every rule of spacecraft design that humans had ever learned. "Captain, are you seeing this?" Ryan Blake called from his station aboard the UHS Defiance. These things are not ships in any sense we understand. They are alive. Amy studied the tactical display with growing horror. The swarm vessels moved through space like enormous sea creatures swimming through an ocean of stars. The smallest ones were the size of human destroyers, but they writhed and twisted as they flew. The largest was over 10 kilometers long, its surface covered in what looked like eyes and mouths that opened and closed in a rhythm that made her stomach turn. "Dr. Vasquez, please tell me you have some good news about these things," Amy said. Into her communication device, the scientist's voice came back tense with fear and fascination. "Captain, I am reading massive bioelectrical activity from every swarm vessel. They are not using conventional engines or weapons. Everything they do is based on biological processes we barely understand. The good news is that they still follow the laws of physics. The bad news is that they appear to be learning from every sensor scan we take of them." Admiral Morrison's voice cut through the chatter from the fleet flagship. "All ships maintain current positions and prepare for detailed reconnaissance. We need to understand what we are fighting before we engage." The human fleet spread out in a defensive formation that would have been textbook perfect against any conventional enemy, but the swarm was not conventional. As the humans watched, the alien creatures began to move in patterns that seemed to flow like water rather than fly like spacecraft. Colonel Roberts monitored the situation from his transport ship while his Marines prepared for ground operations. "Admiral, my teams need to understand what they will face on the surface. Can we get close-range scans of the planetary invasion?" "Negative, Colonel. We are maintaining safe distance until we know more about their capabilities," Morrison replied. "But our long-range sensors show massive movement of swarm ground forces. They appear to be consuming everything organic on the planet and converting it into more of themselves." Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker commanded the destroyer UHS Falcon at the edge of the human formation. His ship was small and fast, designed for reconnaissance and quick strikes. "Admiral, request permission to move closer for detailed scans. The Falcon can get in and out before they can react." "Permission denied, Commander. We do not know their sensor range or response time. All ships will maintain current positions." But the decision was taken out of human hands. The swarm had detected the arrival of the human fleet, and their response was immediate and terrifying. The creatures did not send messages or attempt communication. They simply began to move toward the humans with the single-minded hunger of predators who had found new prey. "All ships, enemy contacts are moving toward our position," reported the tactical officer on the UHS Retribution. "Estimated time to engagement range is 43 minutes. Amy felt her heart begin to race. This was the moment that would define not just the battle, but possibly the future of all life in the galaxy. "Ryan, weapon status? All batteries charged and ready, Captain. Point defense systems are online. Marine assault teams are standing by." Across the fleet, similar reports came in from hundreds of ships. 4 million human beings prepared to face an enemy that had destroyed everything sent against it. In the transport ships, Marines checked their weapons and said prayers to gods from a dozen different human cultures. In the engine rooms, technicians made final adjustments to systems that would need to perform perfectly under conditions they had never been tested for. Dr. Vasquez worked frantically in her laboratory, analyzing every piece of data the sensors could gather. "Admiral, I am detecting some kind of communication between the swarm vessels. They are coordinating their approach using bioelectrical pulses that travel faster than light. This suggests they have some form of quantum entanglement in their neural networks." "What does that mean for our tactics?" Morrison asked. "It means they can share information instantly across their entire force. Every ship knows what every other ship knows. They are not just coordinated, they are literally thinking as one mind." The implications were staggering. Humanity had brought the largest fleet in their history to fight an enemy that could think and react as a single organism. Traditional fleet tactics assumed that enemy ships would need time to communicate and coordinate. The swarm had no such limitations. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," the fleet commander announced. We are about to engage an enemy unlike anything we have faced before. They think as one and adapt to our tactics in real time, but they have never faced human determination. They do not understand courage, sacrifice, or the willingness to die for something greater than ourselves. Today we teach them about the human spirit. The swarm vessels continued their approach, moving in formations that seemed to shift and flow like living things. They made no attempt to communicate or negotiate. They simply came forward with the inevitability of a natural disaster. Lieutenant Commander Parker gripped his control stick tighter. All hands prepare for combat. Remember your training and trust your shipmates. We are about to show these things why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The first shots of the battle were fired by the Vanguard when the lead swarm vessel came within weapons range. The human weapons lit up space with precisely aimed energy beams and kinetic projectiles. The swarm creature absorbed the hits without slowing down, its hull rippling and reforming around the impact points like liquid metal. Then the creature fired back, and the humans learned that the swarm's weapons were as alien as everything else about them. The swarm's weapons were unlike anything humans had ever seen. Instead of energy beams or missiles, the creatures fired what looked like living projectiles that moved through space with their own intelligence. The first salvo struck the UHS Vanguard's shields and began to eat through them like acid through metal. "Shields at 60% and falling," reported Commander Tony Kim's tactical officer. "These things are not just hitting us, they are consuming our defensive systems." The battle spread across the system as more swarm vessels engaged the human fleet. Each alien creature fought with weapons that seemed to grow from its body, firing streams of organic matter that sought out human ships like hungry predators. The humans fired back with everything they had, but their conventional weapons seemed to barely scratch the enemy's living hulls. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker pushed his destroyer UHS Falcon forward into the thick of the fighting. His crew had trained for ship-to-ship combat, but nothing had prepared them for this. The swarm vessel they targeted absorbed their weapons fire and kept coming, growing larger as it consumed the energy from their attacks. "All batteries focus fire on the same target," Parker ordered. "If we cannot hurt them individually, maybe we can overwhelm their ability to absorb damage." The concentrated firepower from 3 human destroyers struck the swarm creature at the same time. For a moment, it seemed to work. The alien vessel's hull began to ripple and crack under the assault. Then it did something that made every human in the fleet question their understanding of physics. The creature split in half, becoming 2 smaller vessels that were each as dangerous as the original. Both new ships immediately began firing at the human destroyers that had attacked them. "Admiral, this is impossible," came the voice of Captain Lisa Wright from the heavy cruiser U.S. Thunderbolt. "These things can reproduce during battle. Every time we damage one severely, it makes more of itself." Admiral Morrison watched the tactical display with growing concern. The human fleet was larger and better organized than anything the swarm had faced before, but conventional tactics were proving useless. All ships switched to random engagement patterns. Do not focus fire on single targets. Keep them guessing about our intentions. Dr. Vasquez worked frantically in her laboratory as the battle raged around her. "Admiral, I think I understand what is happening. The swarm vessels are not just absorbing our weapons' energy. They are analyzing it and learning to counter it. Each shot we fire teaches them how to defend against the next one." "Then how do we fight them?" Morrison demanded. "We need to do things they cannot predict or analyze. The swarm's strength comes from their ability to adapt to logical tactics. We need to be completely illogical." Captain Amy Foster heard the conversation from her position on the UHS Defiance. "Dr. Vasquez, what if we used our weapons in ways they were never designed for? Would that be illogical enough?" "It might work, Captain. The swarm is trying to understand our technology by how we use it. If we use it in unexpected ways, they cannot adapt properly." Foster turned to her weapons. "Officer Ryan, can you modify our main batteries to fire in random patterns instead of aimed shots?" "Captain, that goes against every principle of space combat. We will waste most of our ammunition and barely hit anything. That is exactly the point. The swarm expects us to aim carefully and fight efficiently. We're going to fight stupidly and see if that confuses them. The UHS Defiance began firing its weapons in wild, seemingly random directions. Most of the shots missed their targets completely, but the few that hit seemed to cause more damage than before. The swarm vessel they were fighting appeared confused. By the chaotic attack pattern across the fleet, other human captains began to adopt similar tactics. Commander Ben Taylor led his cruiser in a spiraling attack run that violated every rule of space combat. Captain Sarah Jones actually flew her ship backward while firing, using her engines to confuse the swarm's targeting systems. The aliens began to show signs of uncertainty for the first time. Their perfect coordination started to break down as they tried to adapt to tactics that made no sense. Some swarm vessels began firing at empty space, apparently trying to anticipate where the humans would move next, on the surface of the Zephyrian homeworld. Colonel Roberts and his Marines faced their own nightmare. The swarm's ground forces were creatures that seemed to emerge from the planet itself. They moved like liquid metal given life, flowing through the ruins of cities and consuming everything in their path. "Sergeant Hughes, take your squad around the left flank," Roberts ordered. "Do not engage directly, hit and run only." Sergeant Major Carol Hughes led her Marines through the twisted remains of what had once been a beautiful alien city. The swarm. Creatures were everywhere, but they moved in predictable patterns as they consumed the ruins. Hughes realized that the ground forces were even more mechanical in their thinking than the space vessels. "Colonel, these things are following some kind of programmed behavior," she reported. "They are not really thinking about what they are doing. They just consume everything they find." Robert smiled grimly. "Then we give them something unexpected. To find, all units prepare improvised explosive devices using our emergency rations. If these things want to eat everything, let them choke on it." The Marines began planting booby traps throughout the city using their food supplies and medical equipment. When the swarm creatures consumed the modified supplies, the chemical reactions caused violent explosions that tore through their liquid forms. Private First Class Alex Turner, a former biochemist who had joined the Marines to fight the swarm, made a crucial discovery. "Colonel, the ground forces are not just consuming matter randomly. They are trying to process it and send information back to the main hive mind. What if we could poison their information instead of just their bodies?" "What do you mean, Turner?" "I mean we feed them false data. Make them think they are learning useful information when they are actually being given garbage. If we can confuse their hive mind, it might affect their space forces as well." Back in space, the battle had been raging for 12 hours. The human fleet had lost 37 ships, but they had destroyed or damaged over 100 swarm vessels. More importantly, they had proven that the aliens were not invincible. Lieutenant Commander Parker found himself in command of the UHS Falcon as it faced down a massive swarm creature that had been stalking his ship for hours. His weapons were almost depleted and his shields were failing, but he had one last desperate idea. "All power to engines," he ordered. "We are going to ram that thing." "Sir, that is suicide," his tactical officer protested. "No, it is the one thing they will never expect. The swarm thinks in terms of efficiency and survival. They cannot understand the concept of sacrifice for a greater cause." The UHS Falcon accelerated toward the swarm vessel at maximum speed. The alien creature tried to move out of the way, but Parker anticipated its movement and adjusted course. At the last second, he activated the ship's self-destruct system. The explosion lit up the system like a miniature star. Both ships were destroyed. But the psychological impact on the swarm was devastating. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered an enemy that would choose death over defeat. Admiral Morrison watched the sacrifice of the UHS Falcon with tears in her eyes. "All ships, Lieutenant Commander Parker has shown us the way. The swarm cannot understand human courage. We will use that against them." The explosion of the UHS Falcon created a shock wave that rippled through the swarm's hive mind like a stone thrown into still water. For the first time since the battle began, the alien creatures hesitated. Their perfect coordination faltered as they tried to process an action that made no logical sense to them. Dr. Elena Vasquez watched her instruments with growing excitement as the bioelectrical readings from the swarm vessels fluctuated wildly. Admiral Lieutenant Commander Parker's sacrifice has disrupted their neural network. The hive mind is struggling to understand what happened. Admiral Morrison seized the opportunity immediately. All ships implement random attack patterns now. Give them as many illogical actions as possible while they are confused. The human fleet erupted into controlled chaos. Ships flew in spiraling patterns while firing their weapons at seemingly random targets. Captain Amy Foster ordered her crew to fire their main guns while flying upside down relative to the galactic plane. Commander Ben Taylor had his gunners aim at empty space and then suddenly shift to concentrated fire on single targets. The swarm vessels began to show signs of actual panic. Some creatures froze in place while others began firing at their own allies. The hive mind that had been their greatest strength was becoming a weakness as conflicting information flooded their shared consciousness. "Captain Foster, this is working," reported Ryan Blake from his tactical station. "The swarm ship we have been fighting is moving in circles. It seems completely lost. But the real breakthrough came from the surface of the planet." Private Alex Turner had been working with the surviving Zephyrian scientists to create a biological weapon that would target the swarm's digestive processes. Using samples of swarm tissue collected from destroyed ground forces, they had developed a toxin that would be deadly to the creatures but harmless to other forms of life. "Colonel Roberts, we have it," Turner reported excitedly. "The toxin is ready for field testing. We need to get it into their food supply." Roberts looked around at the devastated city where his Marines were fighting. "Turner, everything on this planet is their food supply. How do we deliver it effectively?" "We contaminate their processing centers, sir. The swarm has built massive facilities to convert consumed matter into new creatures. If we can poison those facilities, the toxin will spread through their entire ground force." Sergeant Major Carol Hughes volunteered to lead the mission. "Colonel, my squad knows this city better than anyone. We can get to the processing center and plant the toxin." "Hughes, that facility is heavily defended. You might not make it back." Hughes smiled grimly. "Sir, after what we have seen today, making it back is not the priority. Stopping these things is." The mission launched at dawn. Hughes and her team moved through the ruins using every trick they had learned in their guerrilla war against the swarm ground forces. They avoided the main streets where the creatures flowed like rivers of living metal, instead using underground tunnels and collapsed buildings to approach their target. The swarm processing center was a nightmare of organic technology. Massive tubes carried consumed matter into chambers where it was broken down and reformed into new creatures. The facility pulsed with the same sick light that covered the rest of the planet. "Turner, how much of this toxin do we need to use?" Hughes asked as they prepared to enter the facility. "All of it, Sergeant Major. We need to contaminate the entire system to have any chance of success." The Marines fought their way into the heart of the facility, using explosives and small arms to clear a path through the swarm defenders. The creatures seemed more aggressive here, as if they understood that the humans posed a threat to something important. Hughes reached the central processing chamber and began to deploy the toxin into the main feed lines. Almost immediately, the facility began to react. Alarms that sounded like screaming filled the air as the toxin spread through the system. "All Marines, get out now," Hughes ordered. "This place is going to come apart." But as they tried to escape, more swarm creatures poured into the facility. Hughes realized that her team would not be able to fight their way out while carrying the heavy toxin dispensers. "Turner, take the others and go. I will hold them off." "Sergeant Major, we are not leaving you. That is an order, Private. Someone needs to report what we learned here. Go." Hughes made her last stand in the central chamber. using every weapon she had to keep the swarm creatures away from the toxin dispensers. Her sacrifice bought Turner and the other Marines enough time to escape and report the success of their mission. The effects of the toxin spread rapidly through the swarm ground forces. Creatures that had been consuming the planet began to writhe and dissolve as the poison attacked their biological systems. More importantly, the facility that Hughes had contaminated was connected to the orbital swarm vessels through bioelectrical conduits. In space, Captain Foster watched in amazement. As the swarm ships began to show signs of distress, Dr. Vasquez, what is happening to them? The toxin from the surface is affecting their entire network. The ground forces and space forces share the same biological systems. By poisoning one, we have poisoned them all. The largest swarm vessel, the 10-kilometer creature that had been directing the battle, suddenly stopped moving. Its surface began to change color from the sick gray-green it had been to a mottled brown that looked like decayed. Admiral Morrison saw the opportunity and took it. All ships, concentrate fire on the command vessel. If we can destroy their leader, the rest might fall apart. The entire human fleet focused their weapons on the dying creature. This time, their attacks had devastating effect. The toxin had weakened the swarm's ability to absorb and redirect energy. The creature's hull cracked and split under the assault, but even as it died, the command vessel tried one last desperate attack. It fired every weapon it had at the UHS Retribution, attempting to take the human flagship with it into death. Captain Sarah Jones, commanding the UHS Thunderbolt, threw her ship between the dying creature and the Admiral's flagship. Her vessel absorbed the full force of the swarm's final attack, her shields failing and her hull cracking under the massive energy discharge. "This is Captain Jones," she reported calmly as her ship began to break apart. "Hull breach on all decks. We are not going to make it. Admiral, finish them off." The UHS Thunderbolt exploded in a brilliant flash, taking the last of the swarm's weapons fire with it. The command creature finally died, its massive form going dark and beginning to drift powerlessly through space. All across the system, the remaining swarm vessels began to lose coordination. Without their hive mind to guide them, they became individual creatures acting on instinct rather than intelligence. Some tried to flee toward the edge of the system, while others simply stopped moving altogether. "All ships pursue and destroy fleeing enemy vessels," Morrison ordered. "We cannot allow any of them to escape and warn other swarm forces." The battle was turning into a rout. Human ships hunted down the scattered swarm creatures with ruthless efficiency. The toxin continued to spread through the alien network, weakening them and making them vulnerable to conventional weapons. For the first time since the war began, the swarm was in retreat. The last swarm vessel died 3 days after the battle began. Captain Amy Foster watched from the bridge of the UHS Defiance as the final alien creature drifted through space, its biolights flickering and going dark forever. The silence that followed was deeper than anything she had ever experienced. "Admiral Morrison, this is Captain Foster reporting. All enemy contacts have been eliminated. The Kepler 442 system is secure." The response came back immediately from the flagship. "Confirmed." "Captain, all ships, stand down from battle stations. Begin search and rescue operations for survivors." Across the system, human ships began the grim task of searching for escape pods and damaged vessels. They had won the battle, but the cost had been terrible. 43 ships had been destroyed, and over 50,000 humans had died in the fighting. Yet for the first time since the war began, an entire swarm force had been completely destroyed on the surface of the Zephyrian homeworld. Colonel Roberts stood in the ruins of the capital city watching his Marines tend to the survivors they had found. The toxin had killed every swarm creature on the planet, but it had also left behind a world that would take decades to heal. The once beautiful cities were ruins and the forests were gone, but life would return eventually. "Colonel, we have found Ambassador Kethel," reported one of his officers. "He is alive but injured." Roberts hurried to the medical station where the Zephyrian diplomat lay on a stretcher. Kethel's blue scales were pale, and he looked older than when Roberts had first seen him in the council chambers on Earth, but his eyes were alert and filled with gratitude. "Colonel Roberts, your people have done the impossible. The swarm is gone from our world. Ambassador, we came here to help our allies." "That is what humans do." Roberts knelt beside the stretcher. "How many of your people survived?" "Perhaps 2 million out of our population of 8 billion. But that is 2 million more than would have lived if you had not come." Kethel reached out with a shaking hand to grasp the colonel's arm. "We asked for advisors and you sent us an army. We asked for help and you gave us our freedom." Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived at the planet's surface 12 hours later with a team of scientists and medical personnel. Her research during the battle had not only provided the key to victory, but had also opened new possibilities for defending against similar threats in the future. "The swarm's biology is fascinating and terrifying," she explained to Colonel Roberts as they toured the abandoned processing facilities. "They were not truly alive in the way we understand life, but they were not machines either. They existed in a state between biology and technology that we are only beginning to understand. Can we use that knowledge to protect other worlds?" Roberts asked. "Absolutely. The toxin we developed can be modified to work against any similar biotechnological threat. More importantly, we now understand that the swarm's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their hive mind made them powerful, but it also made them vulnerable to psychological warfare." News of the victory at Kepler 442 spread throughout the galaxy within hours. Species that had been hiding in fear began to emerge from their fortress worlds. The Altarian Republic, which had lost most of its fleet in the first battles against the swarm, sent messages of congratulation and offers of alliance. The Centauri Confederation opened its shipyards to human vessels that needed repairs, but the most significant response came from the surviving swarm forces in other parts of the galaxy. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered an enemy that could not only resist them but completely destroy them. The psychological impact was devastating to creatures that had believed themselves to be the ultimate form of life. Admiral Morrison called a meeting of all senior officers to plan the next phase of the war. "People, we have proven that the swarm can be beaten, but there are still swarm forces in at least 6 other star systems. We need to hunt them down and eliminate them before they can adapt to our tactics." Captain Foster spoke up from her position around the conference table. "Admiral, what if they tried to flee to another galaxy? We cannot chase them across the entire universe. Then we make sure they know that running will not save them. We are going to track down every swarm nest and destroy it. When we are finished, the galaxy will know that humanity keeps its promises to protect innocent life." The campaign that followed became known as the Great Cleansing. Human fleets supported by ships from grateful alien species hunted the remaining swarm forces across dozens of star systems. Each battle was easier than the last as word spread about human tactics and the biotoxin that could kill the creatures. Captain Lisa Wright led the final assault on the last known swarm stronghold in the Vega system. Her fleet found only empty space and dead creatures floating among the asteroids. The survivors had poisoned themselves rather than face another battle with humans. "This is Captain Wright reporting to Galactic Command. The Vega system is clear. All swarm forces have been eliminated. The war is over." General Paul Martinez, now wearing the insignia of the new Galactic Defense Force, addressed the assembled representatives of 47 species in the rebuilt council chambers on the Zephyrian homeworld. "Today we celebrate not just the end of a war, but the beginning of a new age of cooperation among the species of this galaxy." Ambassador Kethel, fully recovered from his injuries, stood to address the gathering. 6 months ago, the Zephyrian Alliance came to humanity asking for advice and guidance. What we received was something far more valuable. We received proof that courage, determination, and the willingness to sacrifice for others can overcome any enemy, no matter how powerful. Dr. Vasquez had established research stations throughout the former war zone, studying the remains of swarm technology and biology. Her work would lead to advances in medicine and engineering that would benefit every species in the galaxy. More importantly, she had developed early warning systems that would detect any similar threats long before they could become dangerous. Colonel Roberts, now a general in the Galactic Defense Force, trained mixed units of humans and aliens in the tactics that had proven so effective against the swarm. The key lesson was simple. When facing an enemy that relied on logic and efficiency, the best response was controlled chaos and unpredictable courage. Captain Foster stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Galactic Defense Station, watching ships from dozens of species working together to patrol the trade routes. Humanity had entered the galactic community as junior partners, but they had earned their place as leaders through their willingness to fight for principles rather than profit. The galaxy had asked for help against an enemy that threatened all life. Humanity had responded by sending not just an army, but an idea that freedom was worth any sacrifice and that no species should face extinction alone. The swarm was gone, but the bonds forged in that desperate war would last for generations. In the end, the aliens had been right to ask humanity for help. They had just underestimated what that help would look like when it arrived.